Hey guys, this week we're going to be looking at the brush panel, how you use the brush panel, how you use the brush tool, how you create brushes and different stuff like that. And I just want to start this demo off just by doing a quick breakdown of the work space that I use when I'm going in and I'm doing just kind of a little bit of digital illustration. I don't do a whole lot of it, but just kind of how I set my panels up. I'm just going to pull out a few that I like to use. I'm going to grab my swatches panel. I'm going to grab my layers panel, adjustments panel. I'm going to also grab my color panel. I like to use this one sometimes. I'll put it right above my swatches. A couple of other ones that I like to use. I like to use the layer comp, and I'll also grab my properties panel and just collapse those. This is the only time that I ever really work with panels over here on the left hand side, but I do like to put my brushes and my brush and my brush settings panel over here. It just gives me more room, and it also allows me to work with my page in the center of my screen. That's my setup. I'm gonna undock the rest of these, and I'm just gonna click the X, and then I'm going to drag these over here and dock this, and that's kind of how I like to work. And then I'll just go in and save this workspace. Click save, and that's the workspace I like to go with. Some shortcut keys that we've talked about this semester, but I'll make sure that I review today is the B key. B is in brush. B is the shortcut key for your brush tool. You can change the brush size with your left and right bracket keys. If you hold down shift, you can change the hardness and the softness of your tip. So shift, left and right bracket will do that. When your brush tool is selected, you have opacity options and flow options. The shortcut keys to change these right here are your numerical keys. Pressing 3 or pressing 4 or pressing 7 is going to set your opacity, and then when you add shift to that, it's going to allow you to set your flow. Now, one thing that I like to use when I'm using the brush tool is if you hold down, and this is on a Mac, if you hold down the control and the option key, you can click and drag right or left to change your brush size, or click or drag up and down to change your brush hardness. Also, up here in the top options bar, you have this new option called smoothing. I can't remember when this was added, but this is a quick way, kind of like with Illustrator's fidelity option when you're working with the brush tool. If you kind of have shaky hands and you need your brush strokes to be a little smoother, you can work with the smoothing option up here. Before we dig into these two panels, up here in my options bar, I want you to pay close attention to the opacity and the flow. I'm just going to lay down this brush stroke. They're both at 100%, and you can kind of see how this looks. Now, as I start to drop my opacity, this is at 30% opacity, you'll see how this brush stroke actually looks. And as I turn that opacity back up, and I start to turn my flow down, I'm going to turn my flow down to 70% flow, you'll see that it changes the way that this brush stroke is laid out. It changes the flow basically of the ink. So what this is used for is this is used for either building up your brush by just having to go over it a couple of different times. And I'm going to make this softer brush. Having to go over this a couple of times to build that up, or actually being able to go in and just lay that full color down with one stroke. I usually work with a pretty small flow, anywhere between like 4% and 20%. So I'm going to put this one on 10%, and I'm just going to choose a different color, and you can see how we can go in and we can build this up. The more I go over it, the darker it's going to get, versus if my flow was just up at 100 and that's it. So you can kind of go in and play with that and control that how you want. Alright, so let's dig into these two panels. Let's start off with the brushes panel. The brushes panel has been updated and it now allows you to create brush sets, and you can take your brush tips and whatnot that you create and you can organize those into these sets. It's really as easy as clicking on the set and then taking any brushes that you have and dragging them into that set. It's a real quick way to organize your brush panel. Now there are a lot of free brushes out there that you can get. Adobe has made available this huge brush set created by a guy named Kyle T. Webster. But you can go to your brushes panel, you can click on your flyout menu and go to get more brushes. It'll take you to this page right here, and you can go through and you can take a look at all of these different brushes and you can download these for free. Alright, so let's take a look at a couple of these. I'm just going to work with a round brush for right now, and I'm going to turn my size down a little bit, and we want to take a look at this brush settings panel. Now in the brush settings panel you have a lot of different options. These first 8 or 9 options right here actually give you the ability to go in it and work with all different types of things, everything from your brush tip shape, which is the size, the hardness, the roundness, the angle. If I grab another brush over here and turn this up, you can change the spacing of your brush tip. So this is what your brush stroke will look like based on spacing. But you can also go in and change the angle. You can change the roundness of this. So you can take one brush tip and have a lot of different options for that tip. Over here up under a couple of these different options, when you click on shape dynamic, you have the ability to do a lot of different things. Size jitter, and you always want to pay attention to your preview. This is your preview down here, so this is going to show you what your brush tip is going to actually look like. Turn that up. Now I'm working with a Wacom tablet, and right here up under control I have pen pressure selected. This gives me the ability to press really soft. I'm going to turn that down a little bit. Press really soft or really hard, and it changes the tip. You can go in and play with the minimum diameter, and we'll talk about these a lot more in class today. But size jitter, anytime you ever see jitters, kind of like a randomization. Angle jitter, you'll see that more with a brush that is not round. You go in and grab a different brush. Angle jitter, you can see how it's changing that down here in the preview. Roundness jitter, you can see how it's changing the size of those. As I go to scattering, we can throw this off our axes. You can go in and play around with that. The count jitter, and it'll change the way your brush stroke looks. Transfer is another one that I like to use. This is where you can set up an opacity. So whether you're setting your brush up and you're gonna draw and be able to press lightly to lay it down lightly, press a little more hard to lay down a much harder brush stroke. I'm gonna go in and change that brush stroke again. So there's a lot that you can do. There's a lot of options here. I do encourage you just to go in and play around with these. And what we're going to do is in the next demo, we're going to look at creating a couple of custom brushes, and then we're just going to look at some tips and tricks when you're going in and you're actually using these brushes.